For the past 20 years, Gallup has conducted a workforce engagement survey, and the findings are pretty dismal. Currently, 60% of the American workforce are disengaged in their jobs, and then 1 in 7 are actively disengaged, or in other words, they're making things worse at their company by staying employed. And while that's a painful place to wake up every morning if that's you, starting a job search is really daunting. Your interview skills are rusty at best because the last time you interviewed for a job was for the job that you're currently in, and for most people that's been years. And then the idea of updating your resume also makes you cringe. The thought of how much time and effort it'll take to land your next position is really hard, especially among the competition. It has you all really second guessing if it's going to be worth it. Besides, even if you're lucky enough to land your ideal job, being that new person, while exciting, is also a bit anxiety-inducing. One day you show up and you're expected to be an expert, and instead you feel like an imposter drinking from a fire hose. That's happened to me before. So it's all enough to make you question if your current job really isn't that bad after all. Yet deep down, you know that if you stay any longer, your soul might be crushed past the point of no return, and that's no way to live. So you must go, but where to start? If you want to learn the 4 steps to conduct a job search the right way, just keep watching. Hi, I'm Coach Carrie, people leader, HR strategist, executive coach, master trainer, and author. Let me start by acknowledging 2 things. First, in full transparency, I'm going to be telling you about a strategy that I built and have a book about. Yes, I would be delighted to have you buy my book. It's called Job Shopping, and I will put a link in the description if you're interested. I genuinely want to tell you about a better way to get a job. So on to point 2. The traditional job search process is fraught. It involves the dreaded task of updating your resume and then applying to online job postings and then waiting, hoping that you've stacked your resume with enough keywords just to have some AI bot push your application, most likely into the overloaded inbox of a junior recruiter. Now, your actual chance statistically of getting a job this way is 0.4%, or 1 job for every 250 applicants. But the more popular that remote work has become, I've seen candidate pools increasing past 500. So unless you know someone in an organization on the inside who can put in a good word for you, getting a job by applying online has become, unfortunately, next to impossible. Now, it does still happen. If you're one of the first 25 applicants, you have a pretty good chance of having your resume get seen. And if you're well qualified for the role, most likely you'll get outreach. But most of us aren't tracking job postings and getting alerts every single day where we're able to respond in that timely of a fashion. So let's rethink how we're doing this whole job searching process. You with me? All right, so I say there's a better way to do this. I call the process job shopping, and I wrote a how-to guide that gives you a step-by-step process to clarify and find your ideal career, hack your LinkedIn profile so it works for you, and then nail the interview so you can receive multiple job offers. In this video, I'm going to give you the high-level overview of that process and a sneak peek on what's included in the book. Then, if you want more detail, you decide if buying it would be helpful. Okay, let's dive right into the 4 steps to supercharge your job search process. They are clarify, aim, polish, and execute. We are going to go through each in greater detail, starting with clarify. So I believe there are 2 big existential questions we're always asking ourselves. Who am I? And what should I do with my life? When people are dissatisfied at their jobs, they look around and say, I'm not happy. It must be the thing I'm doing day in and day out. It must be my job. I'm going to change my job. All of that reasoning can happen really quickly in the brain, but the problem is that it doesn't really answer the first question of who am I? So in the clarify phase of your job search, I recommend a process of personal reflection to name your values, identify and validate your strengths, passions, and interests. I recommend that you take Jonathan Field's Sparketype assessment and meet with a certified Sparketype coach, yours truly being one of them. I'll also put a link to that free assessment in the description. The Sparketype assessment aims to name the type of work that motivates your highest and best performance, the thing that you do whether you're getting paid for it or not. This archetype or Sparketype is part of your identity, and knowing it can be really life-changing. It was for me. As part of the Clarify process, I also recommend you take an inventory of all of your previous jobs and highlight what was both good and bad about each position. Look for the themes and identify your must-haves and your must-avoids for any future jobs. I also think it's important to identify the environmental conditions under which you work best. Is it a light-filled space? Do you like working with other people, one-to-one, one-to-some, one-to-many? Do you like remote and asynchronous work? All of these things are really important to do as part of your reflection and your identity. So in the book, I guide you on how to conduct all of these reflection exercises. But let's talk about step 2, which is aim. So when deciding what you really want to do, I think it's best to write out your ideal job description. And I recommend the more descriptive, the better. So you want to talk about the duties you love to perform, considering how often you're in meetings, collaborating with others versus doing individual work. What are the skills and strengths that you like to do on a day-to-day basis? This step is in the AIM process because once you have written a job description, your ideal job description, it really becomes a roadmap. So you'll want to take that job description to the internet and see if this job exists or not. Is it a role that commonly is hired for at companies, and then what companies? In some cases, what you write up may seem like it doesn't exist, but I'll tell you that most jobs we think of as novel already exist in the world. If you can dream it up, probably someone else has too, and it's out there. So knowing the position you're after is really the first step in finding it. So next, you're going to investigate and curate a list of 10 companies that you'd be delighted to work at that align with your values and interests. This is what I call the 10 company list. Does working at a company that makes doggy raincoats sound like your cup of tea? What about working at a tea manufacturing company? If not, what does? I recommend you research a list of companies that you don't even know exist yet. Open your horizons and see what's out there. Now, every time I have a client do this exercise, they are surprised and delighted by the activity. The other thing to consider with companies is their size. Do you like small, medium, or large organizations? So the size of the company gives you a sense for how much personal impact you'll feel in your ability to drive initiatives. Then the subject matter of the industry matters for aligning your values and passions. So there's a lot to consider when thinking about building your 10 company list. And once you start building a list, forget for now whether they have job openings that match your skills or your ideal job. That's actually less important than you think it might be. Then once you have the list of companies, you'll want to head over to LinkedIn and determine who you know that works at each of those 10 companies. And you'll want to start with the companies where you have the most obvious connections. What you're going to do is you're going to start to reach out and make new connections with people in your field of interest, and then potentially someone or a few people in the HR department, like the recruiters, and you're going to request an informational interview. But before we go down too far down that path, I want to pause and talk about step 3, which is polish. So before you reach out to anyone at your dream companies, you have to be prepared to present your best self. Now, I have my clients do this by developing a value proposition statement. This is an activity that I have outlined in detail in the book and give you a specific formula for how to build one. Now, I recently worked with a client on creating his value proposition, and it's always a delight to help people unearth those superpowers in a way that adds value. In fact, his value proposition ended up being, I make companies more valuable by cutting out waste in cumbersome back office processes, by implementing practical strategies and advising teams on making sustainable change. I create efficient and flexible organizations. How great is that? I would hire him in a heartbeat. A value proposition is the essence of what you do uniquely well that also benefits your employer. I want you to think of it as the real reason that you've been promoted in the past and why your employers love you. So once you have your value proposition built, you can add it to your resume and clean up your LinkedIn profile to start to market yourself for the job, that ideal job that you really want. This allows recruiters to passively find you as well, because you're putting your best foot forward and you're also stacking your LinkedIn profile with keywords, which allows recruiters to search for you and find you in search results. All right, let's move on. Step 4 is all about execution. This is the part of the strategy that will actually get you job offers. Not by applying online, as we know really doesn't work. You are going to be requesting and holding informational interviews. That's really the big part of the strategy. Well, clarifying, of course, and then aiming. They're all big parts, but you get my point. Really, it's the act or the art of interviewing in these informal conversations called informational interviews. You're going to request and hold informational interviews with subject matter experts in your field at your companies of interest. Or you're going to be in a traditional interview setting at some point. So you're going to be using a handful of powerful interview techniques that are the things that often set my clients apart. They are the problem solution approach, my trademarked ICEA response structure, which as far as I know is the first response strategy introduced since the STAR method. And it's actually more effective than the STAR method because it leads with impact first. And then I teach what I call the 90-second highlight reel, which is the response to that dreaded "tell me about yourself" question. It's the first question everyone asks in an interview. So in the book, I also share a bunch of ninja tricks that are rooted in the principles of both psychology and biology, which will help you feel more confident and connected with your interviewer. Statistically, it's unlikely that you'll be made an offer from your first interview engagement. That's why you have a rolling list of 10 companies that you're connecting with. And I recommend not getting married to any one particular company because you might not get a job at your first company. So you're going to continue with your informational interview process, connecting with multiple people, having great networking conversations until eventually you'll land an ideal job at one of your best fit companies. The moral of the story is that my job shopping methodology is not a sprint, but rather a marathon. However, once you learn the techniques and you get a hang of it, you never really stop doing the networking going forward, which makes your nexter job even easier to land because you're also building that interview and networking muscle and you're applying it continuously. So what I've come to learn, especially the higher you go up in your career, is that getting a job is really an inside job. So if you follow my clarify, aim, polish, and execute method, which is outlined in job shopping, you will land your next position. Well, truthfully, you'll land your next position with or without it. But with my methodology, you're not going to waste time interviewing for jobs at companies that aren't a good fit for you. Life is too short, and if you're like me, you probably spend the majority of your waking hours at work. I believe it can be the norm rather than the exception that you love what you do. Please like the video and subscribe. I have loads of other videos, and please do check out the description for a link to buy my book. I would truly be honored if you bought a copy. Bye for now.